going to try and save everybody a lot of time wasted, because this really isn't worth a great deal of time. The latest hit from the ASPI, a report, they say it's a report. It's glorifying it somewhat to call it a report. It's an opinion piece, okay? So it's an opinion piece that the Guardian have trumpeted. So you've got the Guardian, the ASPI, the BBC, the arms corporations that fund the ASPI, and indeed the BBC and the Guardian, because they're all being played and used by the same paymasters, which is the MIC. So here we have this thing, trigger warning. It says trigger warning. Okay, dramatic stuff. The CPC, coordinated information effort to discredit the BBC. Well, we're already on shaky ground, because the BBC don't need any discrediting, do they? They do a great job themselves, okay? So this is by one Albert Zhang, a researcher apparently, and Dr. Jacob Wallace. Who's this guy, Jacob Wallace? Let's have a look. He's a senior analyst, apparently. There you go. So let's go back to this. I'm doing this on the fly because it isn't worth a great deal of time, because it's just an opinion piece, okay? So we have an introduction here. International media researchers expose human rights abuses. So we're wrong in the first sentence. It's alleged human rights abuses, okay? Oh, now we've got allegations, okay? So correct there, allegations. The Chinese Communist Party, CPC, is hitting back. No surprise. Are you surprised that the CPC is hitting back at unfounded allegations? No, no surprise there. Okay. An information campaign, no different than any government has information campaigns. So no surprise there either. Okay. So what have you found then, you amazing researchers and analysts? Pro-CCP influencers, patriotic trolls. I guess that'll be me then, huh? Silicon Valley social media. Oh, God. Spreading messages. Oh, my God, they're spreading messages. Jesus Christ, help us all. Spreading messages and narratives that seek to undermine critical reporting. Oops, sorry. International media. Research institutes like us and NGOs like us, who are funded by arms corporations. Accusations of bias and disinformation. Well, the bias and disinformation is clear and proven. Okay, so you're wrong again. So that's the first paragraph. Those same efforts also seek to smear. Oh my God, we're not smearing you. Oh dear. And discredit the organizations, blah, blah, blah. Promoting niche alternative Western websites, such as the Grey Zone, who expose everything you do the minute you do it. And we're not allowed to look at niche alternative websites. We're only supposed to look at the shit you put out, or the BBC or the Guardian, really? So people aren't allowed to do this. Don't talk shite. The coordinated approach, it says here, to counter and undermine the BBC. The BBC, again, don't need any undermining. Highlights several features, increasingly agile propaganda and disinformation apparatus. The Chinese government have been around a while, and I would imagine that they have an information apparatus which is already quite agile. It's not increasingly so. They're increasingly having to defend against attacks. So, again, wrong. So, clear temporal and narrative alignment. I don't know what temporal and narrative alignment means unless you use it in conjunction with the word robust. God, I despair. Right, okay, I'm not going to go much further with this. It really isn't worth it. Diplomatic and state media messaging, as well as pro-CCP influencers and patriotic Twitter accounts from which we can infer. Okay, what are you going to infer? A level of coordination. Really? I'm not coordinating with anybody. I do what I think is right. And so do a lot of other people I can name. We do what we think is the right thing to do, which is try and counter the disinformation and propaganda put out by Western MSM, who are funded and paid by the MIC. Pretty simple. So I first saw this here, The Guardian, the Graniad, The Guardian. Not impartial at all. China's Communist Party ran a campaign to discredit the BBC. Oh my God, a think tank finds. Okay, so there you have this hogwash, okay, which is now actually also being carried by Bloomberg politics. Bloomberg. China's BBC attacks. So now they've spun this, you see, they've spun this. Bloomberg have given this a spin to say now it's China attacking the BBC. Jesus Christ. So, and China's BBC attacks show growing sophistication. Group says. What group? Really? So we'll come back to these, Bloomberg and co. So where I'm at is, I thought I'd look at this again. A report. It's not a report. It's an opinion piece. It barely makes an article. It doesn't hold water. So I downloaded and I thought, well, let's see if I can find something that actually holds water. Something that actually you could say, well, you've got a point here, chaps. And I'm scrolling down, and first thing I noticed is all these tables, and they're meaningless. It's meaningless. It's piffle. They're using this piffle, these numbers, the same as Adrian Zenz does, and nobody bothers to actually check the numbers and actually say, well, what does this mean? They just see a table and they think, oh, it must be right. Wrong. It's wrong. It doesn't say anything. Okay, so I'm checking this, and first thing I notice is one of the people I communicate with quite regularly on Western social media, Tao Yi. He's a diplomat for China in Lebanon. I can't remember if he's a consul or ambassador. Quite an important fellow and a nice guy. And this report, this article, this opinion piece by the ASPI says that, picks up on a tweet he did saying that the BBC are fabricating news. Well, he's got an opinion and he's right and he's entitled to that. So I don't know why the biased biased broadcasting channel is what he calls it, which is the polite way of saying the British shitting corporation, company, channel, whatever. And I go a bit further. I think, okay, well, again, we've got a whole load of nothing burger here. There's nothing. They're not saying anything. And then, bam, I find me on here. And I'm like, okay, so that's interesting. So I looked at this in a bit more detail. And what we have here is what they're saying is, they're calling me a British YouTuber, which I object to. I'm not really a YouTuber, although I put some stuff on YouTube. And they say, I claim to live in China. Really, I claim to live in China. They say, I claim to live in China. Okay, so wrong again. I'm responding to the Ofcom ban of the broadcaster CGTN they say, I state that in truth, any thinking person in the UK doesn't trust the BBC. Correct. Suffice to say, the BBC are lying through their teeth. Correct. Yet again, and trying to defame and libel China. Yeah, correct. They're saying the CPC clearly sees significant value in criticism of the BBC coming from voices of UK origin. Well, it's not. I'm actually coming from China. Okay, so let's get that clear. Using these to amplify, they're using this language, amplify existing critique. And then they use this language to spin things. Okay, so there's this spin starts to be evident. It's evident right from the first paragraph. But let's look at this. They use this to amplify existing critique. Nothing wrong with that. That's a reasonable thing for any government or any organization to do. Amplify, I don't know if that's a great word for or correct or accurate. Negative sentiment amongst target English language audiences. Well, for a kickoff, right, there's no campaign. I'm independent, as are thousands and thousands of other people who are doing the same thing as I am, which is they're trying to speak the truth to this corrupt, disingenuous disinformation campaign from the West, from Western governments and from these NGOs and from these these NGOs and organizations that are funded by the people who are kidding you that there's going to be a war, that you have an enemy, the MIC. So the ASPI, we'll go into this in a minute, but the ASPI are funded by Raytheon, by Northrop Grumman, by Lockheed Martin. These are people who make weapons that kill people, that create wars, that destroy entire countries. These are the people that pay the ASPI, okay? So, as I say, I was quite surprised by this, by finding my own name in this document. So let's look at some of the things they say. And these 3 points I mentioned. The BBC spreads disinformation and is biased against China. Correct. The BBC's domestic audiences think it's biased and not to be trusted. Correct. Are you surprised? Really? Is this not news to you? Is this news? You don't, not aware that very few people, thinking people in the UK, trust the BBC? Please. The BBC's reporting on China is instigated by foreign actors and intelligence agencies. Well, it is instigated by the people who pay you and who give you plenty of bakshish, which is the MIC, the people who make weapons, the people who want war, perpetual war, or at the very least the threat of an imaginary enemy, which gives them the justification to keep making billions and billions from your economies on the premise that there is an enemy. Okay, so we'll look at this. Can I move this screen? Oh, I can. Great. Okay. This so-called network is self-propelled. This is my statement and my answer to this. This so-called network that they're talking about, that they have imagined, it's self-propelled. It's entirely individual. It's people like myself, like Andrei Volchev was before his very, very sad demise. Independent people who just want to speak the truth. It's entirely individual. It has its own message without prompt. Nobody's telling me what to say, right? I'm not joining in, so jumping on some bandwagon like you creeps who are being paid to do what you do, okay? It peaks naturally on the same days that Western MSM agitprop pukes forth its latest propaganda against China, Venezuela, Iran, Russia, etc., without the need for any coordination by any external agency. We are independent. We just want to speak the truth, okay? So there's no coordinated thing. So your latest article is piffle, balderdash, codswallop, blarney, okay? I'll continue in a minute. I'm just going to have a coffee.